Molweni bantu bakuthi, greetings. My name is Thami Mbongo. Welcome to the State of the Art with Thami Mbongo, whereby we discuss some of the burning issues around cultural and creative industry in South Africa. We usually invite guests to come and talk to us about their involvement in the cultural and creative industry, and then we unpack some of the burning issues around our cultural and creative industry. As you know, this show is brought to you by the Creative Passport, which is a newly formed company with about 5 directors who are involved in the cultural and creative industry. And those directors involve Uslovo Mampanga, who is a visual artist, Utsepo Muhlale, who's from all the way from Mpumalanga, is very passionate about arts and public art, and also Yul Hetman, who is the choreographer and the dancer, graduated from UCT and worked at VETS, and also Upakama Olwetu Soko, who is arts administrator and coordinator, and myself. The 5 of us came together and decided we want to form a company together that will collaborate after the NAC sit in. So the Creative Passport is a company run by those 5 people. And amongst our programs, we've got this show that is called State of the Art with Thami Mbongo, where we discuss some of the burning issues in the industry. Our previous guests on this edition included we had an interview with Mike van Raan, Dr. Mike van Raan, Dr. Ishmael Mohammed. We've also got engagement with Ayanda Hoda and Pamela Sediti. We spoke to Monica Newton, Lisejo van Niekerk, and we would like to encourage you to please subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is the Creative Passport, and write comment. Let us know which guest you would like to see in the show, and we'll make sure we invite them. Today, our guest is Yvette Hardie. So we know Yvette Hardie, kakhulu thina abantu who are involved in the industry. For those who might not know her, Yvette Hardie is a theater director, producer, educator, and advocate, focusing on theater and performance for young audiences. She initiated the launch of ASSITEJ South Africa in 2007 and leads the NPO as National Director. The organization, ASSITEJ South Africa, creates access to the arts through festival and touring productions, supports artists, empowers education, and connects all those working in the field. She served as president of ASSITEJ, the International Association of Theatre for Children and Young People, from 2011 till 2021, with members from over 100 countries, and is now honorary president of the association. She was responsible for hosting the 19th ASSITEJ World Congress and Performing Arts Festival, Cradle of Creativity, for the first time in Africa in 2017. She produced the award-winning Colonnades theater-led production, Truth in Translation, which taught widely for several years. For her own company, A Free Voice Production, she directs and produced plays which have taught extensively nationally and internationally. She is valued for her work in arts education, having written national curricula and textbook for dramatic and creative arts. She was head of drama at the National School of Arts, where she taught between 1991 till 2004. She has also taught at the Market Theatre Laboratory, after University of Cape Town, and other tertiary institutions. She has an MA in theater practice from TUT. She has written and spoken extensively on issues relating to arts for young audiences, arts education, arts for reconciliation and conflict resolution around the globe. She has engaged with the development of national networks such as PANSA and Arterial Network. Bawuyazibuza ukuthi ubani sithetha ngayo, sithetha ngosis Yvette Hardie. She was awarded the Mickey Minor Award for Lifetime Achievement from IPAY, International Performing Arts for Youth, for her contribution to theater for young audiences locally and globally. As I said, our guest today is Sis Yvette Hardie. How are you, Sis Yvette?
Thank you so much, Thami, for that introduction. I'm very well, thank you. It's lovely to be chatting with you.
Good. So, Sis Yvette, let's unpack. You know, usually in the show, we just want to unpack so that other people who are listening, especially young people who want to be in the same position in the arts, can learn more from the arts practitioner. So you initiated ASSITEJ South Africa. So what made you to decide to initiate that kind of a project?
Well, ASSITEJ as an international organization had been around from 1965 already. I mean, we get that strange French acronym from Paris, which is where the association was first created. And it was really created during the Cold War as a way to bring countries together that were still very suspicious of one another, but who wanted to find ways to work with one another despite their differences, and particularly to focus on giving children and young people access to the arts. So this was not an organization that I knew about at all. Prior to 2006, basically, I had been involved, as you said in your introduction, in a production called Truth in Translation, which was a fantastic South African musical dealing with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Hugh Masekela wrote the music and composed the musical, and we had an incredible cast of South African performers. And we were touring internationally, going to many places that had experienced conflict similar to our own context. So we opened in Rwanda and we went to places in the Balkans, etc. And as we were touring this production and moving around to different parts of the world, we were doing a lot of workshops with young people in response to the production, and having a lot of engagements with organizations on the ground and with other artists from these countries. And somehow I started to connect people and started to realize that they were all a part of this big web, which was ASSITEJ. And then at around the same time, there was a meeting of the African ASSITEJ centers, of which South Africa obviously didn't exist yet. So, you know, we were not invited really, but it was going to be happening in Eswatini. And so the Secretary General of ASSITEJ was very keen to get an ASSITEJ South Africa started. And he asked some people, who should he speak to in relation to this? And they gave him my name, and somehow we connected. And then it was like every little block fell into place, you know, all these people that I'd met in different parts of the world, and what he was telling me, it all kind of came together. And I went, wow, this is amazing. Here's an organization that brings together all the things I love. It brings together theater and children and young people, because I've been very involved in education, and international collaboration. And it's happening here right next door in Eswatini. And so basically, you know, we pulled together people who were interested, and we launched at the National Arts Festival in July 2007 as ASSITEJ South Africa. So it was just one of those wonderful moments where everything seems to come together beautifully.
I'm sure a lot of people would like to know the work that is done by ASSITEJ. And as we said in the introduction, that ASSITEJ is having members over 100 countries. You understand? And I'm glad that we want to know. So can you just unpack, like in easy terms, for anyone out there, you understand, the work that is done by ASSITEJ internationally and the work that is done by ASSITEJ in South Africa, so that people can really understand what ASSITEJ is all about?
So ASSITEJ International is really about ensuring that children and young people across the globe have access to the highest quality performing arts, specifically theatre, but in fact, in recent years, certainly in the time that I've been president, that definition has broadened. So we now talk about theatre and performing arts, because it's everything. It's dance, it's circus, it's puppetry, it's pure theatre, you know, it's physical theatre, it's the whole range. And traditionally, it was bringing together the professionals who made work for children and young people. But also, I think that there's been a shift in, again, sort of over the last maybe 12 years, where the organization has moved more towards what we talk about as being work for, by, and with children and young people. So some work may be made by professionals for children. All the performers are adult. Other work may be made in collaboration with children and young people, where the children are like they're dramaturgs to the process, or they are in some way involved in the process. And then other work is made by the children themselves. So it's really about giving children access to the arts, because we believe that it's every human being's right, and that there should be a professional and really sort of a quality approach to this work, that it's not about just because they're children thinking that you can palm off anything on them and it's going to work, you know. It's really about building high quality work for children and young people. So the International Association largely concerns itself with trying to identify areas that are maybe weaker or could be stimulated more. So for example, in the last sort of 15 years, there's been a big drive to make work for very young children. So literally like the babies, the 0 to 2-year-olds. There's also been a drive towards greater inclusivity, so making work for children with different disabilities and abilities. So really looking at how do we include every child? How do we make work for children who are hard of hearing or deaf? How do we make work for children who are blind, etc.? And then also, you know, looking at in certain parts of the world, you'll find the particular art forms are very strong, but maybe other art forms are not so present. And how do we learn from one another? How do we share what we're good at, what we do well? How do we inspire one another? How do we work, you know, internationally to support one another to make sure that our children have access to this kind of work? So there's a lot of exchange, a lot of mentorships of artists, a lot of opportunities for artists to tour their work internationally or to be in collaboration with other artists in other parts of the world. So it's a very vibrant, you know, organization as an international organization. It also focuses on research around theatre for children and young people. So when ASSITEJ South Africa was started, of course, we didn't have anything like that really in South Africa. You know, we had independent theatre companies who were making work for children, and really only 2 theatres that were solely focused on making work for children, and that was the National Children's Theatre and the Youth Theatre, which is at Joburg Theatre. And, you know, those were the only 2 that had like a building that was dedicated to this audience. Of course, there was a lot that was happening on the ground in after-school programs or in schools in different places or in community centers, you know, but it wasn't in any way connected. And so one of the first things that ASSITEJ South Africa was really trying to do was to bring together everybody from across the spectrum, wherever you were sitting in South Africa. If you were interested in making work for children and young people, if you were working with children in an after-school program or whatever, we were saying, come, you know, be part of us, come and be part of this movement, because we can learn from one another, we can exchange, we can support one another, and hopefully we can grow the space and also make the work stronger. So in South Africa, we have 4, what we call our 4 pillars, which are 4 focus areas, and they are to create access for children and young people to be able to actually see theatre. And so that might be about touring theatre to schools, touring theatre to festivals, getting kids to theatres on buses, you know, getting children to little community festivals that are happening in different parts, but basically making sure that children have access. The second one is about supporting artists. So it's very much driven by, like, what are artists looking for? Do artists want to learn more about writing for young audiences, or do they want to learn more about a particular audience? Like maybe they want to learn more about inclusive work or about working for babies or whatever it is. And how do we support them to do that? How do we sometimes support their organizations to raise funding to tour. And we've done quite a lot of that support, being almost a producer to one of our members, helping them to tour internationally or locally to schools or to festivals. And then our third pillar is to empower education. So it's very much about how do we work with the education system, the curriculum, with teachers in the classroom to make sure that the arts actually happen on the ground in schools, you know. And then the fourth one is around connecting and advocacy. So we believe it's really important that people understand that every child should have access to the arts, you know. And so we want to bring all artists who believe that with us together into this network so that we can be stronger together and we can really make our voices heard.
Thank you very much, Yvette. Another thing that I wanted us to talk about, because, you know, when people create theater for children, some of them and the companies are always looking down as if children are not that smart. You understand? But you realize that children are very smart. You understand? So what is your approach as ASSITEJ in terms of that, to make sure that you're creating quality theater that will speak to the kids? Because it does not mean when you're a good actor or good artist, and then you can easily go into making theater for children. What do you think are pros and cons of making theater for children?
I think the very first thing is that there has to be respect. You know, there has to be real respect for the audience. If you don't respect children, if you're not interested in children, if you're not curious about what children are really thinking and feeling about things, then you shouldn't be making this work. Because this is not about teaching children things. Yes, children will learn something from it, but you know, everybody learns. Whenever we go to a piece of theater, we learn something. We learn what we like and what we don't like. You know, we learn about something and we might forget it immediately, or we might remember it depending on how impactful it was. So it's not about teaching, it's about real communication. And real communication starts with listening, actually. You know, it starts with really being there with children, listening to what it is that they're saying, and then really trying to work out how can we communicate best with them? What artistic means can we use that are going to really captivate them, that are going to engage them? And not thinking that just because children's theatre has tended to have a particular kind of look and feel, you know, that it's always bright and loud and whatever, you know, that's the way children's theatre needs to be. No, in fact, that's not the case. You know, there are as many different children in the world as there are anybody else, you know. I mean, you know, so in other words, we are all unique. Every child is a unique audience. Some children prefer quiet, subtle, gentle, still moments, you know. Some children want something which is energized. And we need to really work with all that diversity, and we need to be sensitive to the audience. And so a lot of the processes that have been developed through ASSITEJ's work in different parts of the world have been around how do we really investigate what the audience wants? You know, who is our audience? How do we speak to them? What will move them? What will engage them? What can we do before the show that can bring them into this experience? What can we do with them after the show, you know, that will help them engage with the experience further? What can we do with them once they go home? You know, are there things that they can take home with them that they can continue to play with? Or are there things that they've learned in the show that they might want to bring into their everyday lives? Or, you know, so there's so much content, I think, but it all starts with that thing of respect and of listening. And in ASSITEJ, we often speak about making theatre at eye level. In other words, you as the adult, if you're making theatre for children, but you're standing up and the child is down there and you're looking down at them, you're not making theatre at their eye level. You've got to get down on your hands and knees. You've got to see them eye to eye. You've got to recognize this human being is as important as I am. You know what I mean? This human being has something important to say. This human being wants to hear something. This human being needs to be taken seriously. And when you can do that, then you start to make some really exciting work for children.
So, Sis Yvette, you also produced Truth in Translation, which I think it's one of the most important work in South Africa. Can you just unpack what really drove you, understand, into that project? And is there any upcoming project? Because there are so many things that are happening in our country. Yeah, you understand? Maybe a piece similar to that one, is needed now in South Africa. Can you maybe just quickly unpack for those who haven't seen Truth in Translation, what it was about and what drove you, to be more interested in producing it, and any plans to produce a similar work?
So Truth in Translation was an extraordinary project to be a part of. And it, again, I mean, it was one of those things that really happened in a way to me by chance. I need to give you a little story here. It's a bit of a digression. I'll come back to Truth in Translation, but just to let you see how things kind of, one thing leads to another sometimes, you know, and you often don't know where your journey is going to lead you. So in 2000, I was busy doing my master's in voice and speech. And I had discovered this amazing voice practitioner, Arthur Lesak, who was in his 90s then, late 90s. But he was still teaching, and he's the most extraordinary human being. And I managed to get onto a workshop with him in the States. And now one of the things that he asked us to do in that workshop was to speak to something that we felt passionately about, to speak about something. And we needed to do it in the context of obviously the voice work that we were learning. But it was just around the time that the TRC report was coming out. And, you know, I'd been very kind of engaged with following what was happening and you know, all the sort of daily news that was happening around it. And now finally the report's coming out. And so this was something that I felt passionately about, and I spoke about it. And afterwards he said to me, you know, I really want you to meet my son, who is a movie director, but he's wanting to go back to theatre, and he's very keen to make a piece about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. He's interested in that subject, and I'd love you to speak to him. And I mean, literally, if I had not spoken about that thing that I was passionate about, I would never have been introduced to Michael Lesak, who was the director of Truth and Translation, and we would probably not have made the play, you know. So sometimes it's crazy how these things work. But anyway, so, you know, it started as a conversation in 2000, and he was really interested in it. He was reading a lot about it. He then came to South Africa. I introduced him to various people. We did a lot of research. We had basically a 4-year research process of, you know, speaking to people who'd appeared at the commission, people who were commissioners, people who, and the focus of the play was the translators, so people who had translated at the commission, you know, a whole range of different kinds of people who'd been involved in one way or another. And it wasn't clear at the beginning what kind of a play it was going to be. But it was like this very organic journey. The more we researched, the more we talked, the more it became clear that, for example, we needed music. And then it was about, well, who's going to do the music? And we were talking to a whole lot of different people about music. And then, of course, Hugh was just the most phenomenal, you know, partner to engage with. He was just totally inspirational. And he brought such beautiful things to the piece, because for him, what he wanted to really focus on was this idea of memory, and this idea that the music that happens in the play is kind of sitting inside the memories of all the characters, and it kind of rises up, you know, almost through their subconscious. And so it was really, it was a huge contribution to the piece. But of course, every actor that we brought into the play also shifted it and changed it, because in the end, Truth and Translation was a workshop production. It did have writers, it had several writers, but it was essentially a piece which was made with actors, responding to all this material that we'd gathered. And so, you know, the people, Tembi Machali-Jones, Nick Borain, Conita Adams, you know, the people who were involved in that cast, Fana Mokoena, they all brought such very important elements to the play, because they were speaking from their own life experiences and their own attitudes. And we didn't want to have a play that was saying one thing, because we felt that that would be contradictory to what the TRC was all about. You know, the TRC was really about putting all those multiple truths out there so many different voices, so many contested truths, so many different ways of seeing a particular situation. And we wanted it to be that diverse. And so that was really how the play was built. But it became something that, you know, as I say, it started in 2000. In 2004, we started to bring the actors together, and we started to actually start to, you know, workshop the material. But we only performed for the first time in 2006. So it was 6 years from that first conversation to actually, you know, being on stage in Rwanda where we opened and then coming to the market. And it was an incredible learning journey every moment. And I had no idea where it was going when I started it. But it was just something that became completely obsessive, I think, for all of us who were involved with it. We just knew we needed to, this was important, we needed to keep working at it. And we continued to work on it right until, you know, the very, very end. And of course, there's a documentary film now about the play, which also tells a lot of the story behind the scenes, etc. And then the organization that built that play has gone on to make other work. So many of the actors have been involved in making a piece in Ireland about the troubles in Ireland, making a piece in Cambodia. So Sibulele and Tembe Machali and Andrew Buckland all went off to Cambodia to work with circus artists there to make this extraordinary piece about the Khmer Rouge. You know, and so it's kind of gone on in different ways with new productions since then, but not with a South African focus, with a focus from somewhere else in the world. In terms of my own, you know, your second question was about, do I feel like this kind of work is still needed? Yes, absolutely. And I think my biggest regret about Truth in Translation is that it was not seen in South Africa enough. We tried, we couldn't get funding to show it in our own country. It's ridiculous. You know, we had a run at the Market, we had a run at the Baxter, and we had some, you know, a few other showings, and then we did quite a lot of the documentary film showings. But to actually get, we wanted to go to every, we wanted to be like the TRC. We wanted to go to every town in South Africa with the play, you know, and start more conversations. Because for me, the whole thing about the TRC is that it's so unfinished. You know, there were so many things that there were so many people whose stories could never be told. There were so many things that were unresolved. There were so many things that we still needed to speak about as South Africans. And the play was an opportunity to do that. And so for me, it's a big disappointment, really, that we weren't able to take it around South Africa as much as I would have liked. But having said that, you know, absolutely, I am hoping that now that I'm no longer president of the International Association, I'll be able to be more involved in creative work again, because I haven't really been able to do much creative work in the last years. It's just been too busy and absorbing. But I'm really hoping that I will be able to start to do more creative work again. And that's the kind of work that really moves me and I think is important, you know.
Yeah, and then another thing, Yvette, the importance of networking and collaboration. As you said, you were the president and you work with more than 100 countries. And I know you always create these opportunities or know of these opportunities in other countries. You understand? And maybe someone who's watching there is not understanding the importance or how to get into that field in terms of understanding who's doing what out there and blah, blah, blah. Can you tell us the importance of networking and collaboration in this industry?
For me, it's absolutely key. You know, it's where, you know, it's where opportunity lies. If you're wanting to ensure that you work as an artist, I think you need to be networking all of the time. You know, you need to be bringing yourself into different spaces, exposing yourself to things that you're unfamiliar with, being challenged by attitudes or views or approaches which are very different from your own as well. Because I think that it really kind of makes you question your own craft and makes you dig deeper then in terms of what it is that you're trying to do. And sometimes it just validates whatever it is that you are and you want. And at other times it opens you up and it gives you like a new possibility of something that you could be exploring, you know. So I think networking is just absolutely crucial on so many different levels, on a creative level, on a kind of entrepreneurial level, on a level of just being kind of informed and seeing where trends are moving and what people are responding to and what might therefore be interesting. So for example, the more you network with people who are running international festivals, the more you know what international festivals are looking for. And then you have a better chance when you apply to an international festival of actually having your work accepted. You start to make the right connections. I mean, I'll give you an example. We've just heard in the last day or so that a wonderful production, No Functional Language, which isn't written like that. It's written in quite a weird way where you don't realize what the words are because they kind of split up oddly. But anyway, it is No Functional Language. Jane Bat-Soften's wonderful piece, which is all about inclusivity. So that's an example of networking, in that Jane was part of one of our Inspiring a Generation programs, I think in 2014, if I'm not mistaken. She went to Denmark, and she, with several other people, several other South Africans, and she attended an international festival there, and she saw work. And then she also had an opportunity to spend time in a company in Denmark as part of this exchange. And then the Danish companies came over to South Africa, and they brought work to the National Arts Festival over a couple of years. And coming out of everything that she'd experienced, she made this piece. I mean, she's always been interested in making work for, audiences of all abilities. And so she was particularly interested in making a completely inclusive piece, which she did, and it was really beautiful. And it went to Cradle of Creativity in 2017. And then people saw it and they were so excited by it, and they invited it to some international festivals. It went back to Denmark, in fact, if I remember rightly, just before COVID hit. And I just heard in the last day or so that it's now been selected by a youth jury to be on the online ASSITEJ festival. ASSITEJ, International Performing Arts for Youth organization, is probably the most prestigious organization promoting work for North America. So they're very crucial in terms of bringing work from the rest of the world and within North America and circulating it around North America. So moving it around the USA and Canada. And it's been selected for presentation there. And that's a really big deal because it's such an opportunity to open a whole new door in terms of where this work could potentially be seen. So that was because Jane, all those years back in 2014, applied to be part of a program which would allow her to network with artists. And it's continuing to feed her 7 years on. Do you know what I mean? And the artists who are obviously involved in that program. So for me, it really, networking is at the heart of being involved in the arts, in a sense, because the beautiful thing about theatre is we don't do it alone. We always do it with other people, So building those relationships, making sure that people both know about you, but also know that they can trust you, that they want to engage with you. Just putting those things in place can really give you a foundation for your career.
Yvette. And I must say also, because I was also once involved in Inspiring Generation. I think we went to Pittsburgh in USA with Ompile Molusi, who is currently the writer, and it really helped, to be in such festivals and networking with other people from different countries. We came back better artists, and we're more inspired in terms of understanding who's doing what out there.
And you know what Ompilo did from that is Ompilo then started, he was so inspired by that festival that you went to, that he started a children's theatre festival in Northwest, where he comes from. And he had this beautiful children's festival that happened for a couple of years. Mauer Artfields, his company, was creating it. And it was all inspired by that event. And Ompile is now on our board. So he's on the board of ASSITEJ South Africa. So, that's another example of how somebody, keeps moving and things happen because of those connections. Yeah.
Wow. That's very impressive. And then Yvette, some people are not understanding when we talk about arts education. Yeah, you understand? And I know you've been very passionate and very vocal when it comes to arts education. You understand? Can you please unpack us, you understand, in terms of your passion and your organization passion towards arts education? And why do you think it's really important for many people to really understand the importance of it?
So, I mean, for me, the arts are fundamental to how we learn. When we practice the arts, we are actually practicing learning how to learn, because what the arts do is they engage every part of who we are as human beings. And, you know, people think about intelligence as being something that is like, what, you know, verbal intelligence or mathematical intelligence. Those are the kinds of intelligences that they think about most often. But actually, we have many more intelligences than those. And they include things like our kinesthetic intelligence, our ability to use our bodies in space, our musical intelligence, you know. So our intelligence to understand ourselves and to understand other people, you know, all of those are forms of intelligence, and the arts cultivate all of them. Whereas some of the traditional ways of learning that school tends to use will only cultivate one or two of them. So I see the arts as being kind of the natural extension of how children learn. And that if we could embed the arts as a methodology into every educational experience across, you know, from early learning, so in creches and kindergartens when children are still playing, and obviously it's very easy to contact the arts, but even as they move up through primary school into high school, I think using the arts as a kind of a lens and a method makes any kind of content more accessible. You know, anybody who's been involved in a play will tell you that they will remember the history and the characters and the whatever of that play. Can you remember what you studied in history? Generally not. But when you were in it, when you were performing it, you know, then you remember it, because it's become a part of your experience. And the same thing is true of all kinds of things. You know, we can teach mathematics and angles and everything else using dance. We can teach, you know, so the fact of the matter is right now, our education system is privileging a particular kind of intelligence. And it's doing it in a way which is really excluding a lot of children and young people from learning effectively. And then also, because the way teaching happens a lot of the time is not fun, you know, and it's not fully engaging, children drop out, or they you know, they sort of they find reasons to disengage. What the arts do is they create an engaged learning environment. You've got to participate when you're involved in the arts. You know, you've got to be in there doing it yourself as well. And that changes the relationships also between teachers and pupils. It creates a more kind of democratic space where everybody's able to work together, where we can all learn things from one another, where it's not just the teacher who holds all the knowledge, but where the learners can bring something to whatever is being discussed. So for me, the arts are really, really crucial to education. And in the best education systems in the world, places like Finland, for example, whose education system has been seen as being like, you know, the most effective, the arts play an absolutely essential role. But what's also interesting is that now in the 21st century, you know, there's been such a focus on 4IR, this fourth industrial revolution, you know, and what do we need for people to be able to be engaged in the fourth industrial revolution? And everybody's thinking, oh, it's about maths, it's about technology, it's about coding, but actually it's about creativity, it's about critical thinking, and it's about empathy. Because, you know, if we don't understand how human beings work, we're going to have massive problems with AI, for example, with artificial intelligence. You know, we have to understand how human beings work. We have to understand ethics. We've got to make judgment calls. We've got to be able to critically analyze all the information that's coming to us in this digital age. So actually what the arts can give us are the skills that we need for the 21st century. And what's interesting is that right now there's been a report that went to the president on 4IR, the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And one of the things that it says is that creative arts is one of the most important things that has to be given attention in schools. right across the learning spectrum, from early years right into university. And so that's really what ASSITEJ is wanting to support. You know, we want to make sure that in every school there is creative arts happening. It's happening in the curriculum, but it's also happening in the after school space, because children should be able to do drama, do dance, do music, do whatever, you know, in their afternoons and weekends, because that's also what keeps them engaged and positive and feeling like they have a contribution to make to the world and like there's a future for them, you know.
Thank you very much, Yvette. And another thing that I wanted us to talk about, because I know you are one of the masters when it comes into funding proposal and business proposal, and obviously from your experience of working with different structures across the world, you understand? We've got so many upcoming artists who are struggling when it comes to funding proposal and doing proposal and business plans. You understand? What do you think is the recipe for success when one is doing that? Any advice for upcoming artists who are working in terms of proposal and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously, you know, proposals are very much linked to the funding parameters that you know, a funder is setting out. So in other words, you're going to need to put a particular kind of proposal together for the National Lotteries Commission, and a different kind of proposal for, say, National Arts Council, and something different again for maybe Arts and Culture Trust and whatever. So I think sometimes people don't realize that enough, and they have a sort of one-size-fits-all proposal, and they're not really looking at what the funder is asking for or needing you to be fulfilling. And they're not taking, you know, in my view, you should be clear about your project. You should know what project it is that you want to do, but you should be able to look at that project and kind of just shift it slightly this way or that way, depending on what is required from you, from the funder. So sometimes that means not changing the goals of the project necessarily, but maybe highlighting a particular aspect of the project, which is going to make it more powerful for that funder and more, you know, give them more reason why they want to give you the money. And then I think another element which is really important is really looking at the kind of project planning. And in that project planning, all the way along, work on the question of, how am I going to know that I'm achieving whatever it is that I'm saying I'm going to achieve? You know, what is going to give me the feedback that I am being successful in terms of this? And you need to build that in right from the beginning. I think a lot of people, they think about monitoring and evaluation, but they think about it only at the end of the project. And they might put in like a couple of things about monitoring and evaluation just in 1 or 2 lines in their project proposal. You know, yes, we'll monitor and evaluate at the end, you know, that kind of thing. But they're not really building it in right from the very beginning, so that you can say, okay, at this stage of the project, this is where I want to be. This is what I want to have achieved. This is, you know, these are the numbers, but also this is the kind of engagement that I want to have had with people. This is how I want them to be talking about the project, ideally, you know. So thinking that through, I think, is very important. And then also just really being realistic about what it is that you can achieve. And if you don't have either the resources or the gaps somewhere in your project, being able to recognize those and saying, who do I need to partner with to make this thing a reality, you know? So maybe I'm doing a project which I want everything to be filmed now because it needs to go online. But actually, I know I'm a theatre person. I haven't really, you know, done much in the way of film, perhaps. And so I either need to engage with someone who really knows what they're doing in terms of film, or maybe I need to build into the project plan that I'm going to train our team, and we're going to go on a film course or something, you know, in order to ensure that we've got the skills that we need. So really identifying where the gaps are. And then looking at realistically, how can you deal with those? And then I think also just really thinking about impact. What is the kind of impact that you want to have? And is it you know, being realistic about that too. Sometimes people will promise the earth and, you know, they can't deliver on it because they've actually just, they've written themselves into a corner in terms of their proposal, you know. And when you read a proposal like that, you kind of look at it and you go, like they're not going to be able to do this, you know. It just feels, it feels unrealistic. But on the other hand, being very clear about what you can do and stating that, and then if possible, you know, what's really great is over delivering so that the next time you go to that funder, you can say, you know, last time we said we were going to do X, we managed to do X and Y. And this time we feel sure that we'll be able to do X and Y and maybe a bit more or whatever, you know. So in that way, you start to build people's trust, and you are seen as a you know, reliable recipient of funding, and someone who delivers. And that's really important. It's so important in project writing. It's not just about the project proposal. It's really about your, you know, your whole identity in a way as someone working in the arts. Is this organization reliable? Can we trust them with this money? You know, how do we know that? Yeah.
Thank you very much, Yvette, for that information. And as I said, the purpose of the show is also to empower other people, you understand, with information, especially with in the industry, because I feel we are not having enough conversations that are empowering other people. And then, Yvette, I know you very actively involved in for the Arts and STAND, and STAND is preparing now the summit that is going to take place in Cape Town, Stellenbosch. Can you tell us more about the summit and the vision and the mission of it?
Yes, of course. So STAND Foundation, as you may know, is the Sustaining Theatre and Dance Foundation. And essentially it is a group of individuals who've come together from the industry to find ways to support the industry from inside, you know. And we see ourselves as a kind of a catalytic foundation. In other words, we want to try and make things happen. We are not a representative association though. So we can't claim to represent anybody apart from ourselves, but we're trying to make the theatre and dance, you know, specifically, but the broader creative and cultural industries, a better place for us all to work in through becoming more self-reliant and becoming more effective in how we raise funds and how we support one another in projects through partnerships, etc. So one of the things that came through with STAND was that, you know, we've been having a lot of conversations within STAND, but then also within I'm for the Arts, within TADA, which is the Theatre and Dance Alliance, you know, all these different organizations around what is it that we as the artists want for our industry. We keep on complaining about what we have, you know, we have all these hashtags, Nadi must fall, etc. You know, all these things that we're complaining about because they're not working, and we know that they're not working. But what is the vision that we actually want to work towards? What do we see as being realistic? And certain organizations have been really trying to grapple with that and, you know, think about it and write strategy documents. But it felt like there wasn't a bigger conversation happening. It was all happening within these different organizations which had a particular sectoral focus. So they had a theatre and dance focus, or they had maybe a visual arts focus, or maybe they were really focused on the IP and, you know, that sort of element. And that somehow we needed to bring everybody into one room and to have a larger conversation, which could really be about where do we as the sector want to see ourselves in 5-10 years from now, and what can we do about it? How can we work with one another to make a real difference on the ground? So this Art Summit, which is called the Stand Together Art Summit, it's been developed through a process of cooperation and engagement with a number of different representative organizations who've all made certain proposals. The idea is that we come together for 3 days in Stellenbosch, and that we have a number of different people representing different parts of the sector and the sort of arts and culture ecosystem, present to really dive into this in a much deeper way. It's not an enormous meeting though, it's just we're looking at about 70 people. So we're seeing it as like a first stage, and hopefully it will develop a document which can then be shared more widely to that broader community, who can then give feedback on that. And, you know, we can then really start to move it forward. But I'm very excited about it. I think that it's, you know, overdue. And I also think that, frankly, with COVID, we've been so separated physically from one another. Having the opportunity to be in one space with COVID protocols, of course, but, you know, to be able to really engage with people in the same room is going to be very, it's going to be very invigorating and very important, I think, for the industry.
Thank you very much, Yvette. The name of the show is State of the Arts. So I will ask you a question. You know, there's so many things that have been happening in our industry with pairs, mismanagement, calling off Minister Natim Tetra must go and all. So in your words, what do you think is the status of arts in South Africa today, and what needs to be done to change some of the things that are happening in our industry?
I think for me, if I could sum it up, it would be that we have a very dysfunctional ecosystem. You know, in the same way that we are concerned about climate change, and we're concerned about the way the natural world seems to be breaking down, and that there seem to be kind of gaps developing where, you know, species are dying, or, you know, the different kinds of conditions are changing in such a way that things are just not functioning as they should. I think that in our case, within the arts and culture ecosystem, we have similar kinds of gaps, and yeah, and disconnects, really. It is very difficult for a young person to move seamlessly from, say, being at school, having a desire to be in the arts, to training in the arts, to actually getting a job in the arts, to being sustaining themselves in the arts, to, you know, building their career. It's like there's so many places missing in that spectrum. So often people don't have access to the right kind of training when they need it, or they don't know, when they've got that training, they haven't been taught how to be entrepreneurial, so they are waiting to be employed. And, you know, or there's right now we have this huge issue of the fact that we have no venues which are open, we have no festivals that are happening in the real world. So, you know, it's incredibly difficult to actually do your work, and it's not yet clear that it's possible to make money really from the online space. You know, some people have managed, but the majority of people have put their things online but have not necessarily made very much in return for that, you know. So I think that there are a lot of questions right now about the viability of the arts, but also of the viability of the systems that kind of support the arts. And what I feel we need to be doing is we need to be having a really sort of a high level look at the entire ecosystem. And we need to be saying, okay, what needs to be happening at the earliest possible age in order for us to have the best operating system later on, you know? If we want to have audiences, how do we make sure that we engage with audiences right from when people come into the world, you know? How do we ensure that the arts are something which are not foreign? You know, most people feel disconnected from the arts. They don't understand what the arts are about. Generally, people will understand what sport is about, you know, and they connect to sport, and they watch sport, and they participated in sport at school or whatever. And so therefore there's some kind of a relationship with sport. There's not always the same connection with the arts. For many people, I mean, we thankfully, you know, I don't feel like that, but I know that there are many people out there who just go, well, why is it important? What's the big deal, you know? And I think that speaks to how it hasn't been really knitted into our schooling and education system in the way that it should have been. And so, yeah, I think that there's so many things that I could talk about in relation to this, but I think that, you know, in the summary, I think the main thing is identifying the gaps and working out how we can bridge those gaps together. And I think that there are some really great examples of what happens in other parts of the world. that we could use, that we could borrow some things and change them a little bit and make them work for us. I think also that we're going to need to be really creative in this particular time where we do have so many issues with live performance as to how else we can generate income from the work that we do. So I think that there's a lot of new learning that needs to happen as well. I would like to see our energy going towards creating a constructive, enabling space as much as possible, rather than getting too sucked into fighting with people or things or, or systems. I think it's important. It is important, but at the same time, we've also got to look at what is it that we can do and how can we make it better in order for us to survive. And I'm hoping that the summit is going to allow us to get some of the way towards that kind of thinking.
Yvette, any closing remarks? Because we really unpacked so much. I understand. I'm hoping it's helpful to the people out there. Is there any closing remarks from your side before I let you go?
I just think, Thami, we have the most extraordinary country and we have the most extraordinary amount of talent in this country. And I look at the young people. I mean, our offices are based in Vrygrond, and I look at the young people in our community in Vrygrond, and I look at the children that we engage with in some of our programs, and I look at the artists who are working in, up the West Coast or in the Karoo, there are extraordinary artists, extraordinary talent in every corner of our country. And I really believe that we need to harness that talent and potential. I feel like, right now, one of the scariest things is the youth unemployment stats, and the fact that we have, 60% or something of young people are unemployed. And, if you are unemployed for a period of time, the likelihood is you will continue to be unemployed. And yet, what is also really exciting is that when you look at some of the UNESCO figures that are coming out of their research, they're saying that the majority of young people in the world are employed in the creative industries. So, I think that really we've got to be looking at how do we bring these things together? How do we bring together young, talented people and give them opportunities to make a difference where they are at, wherever they are in our country? And one of the ways to do that is by connecting them to schools, connecting them to creches, connecting them to spaces where children and young people need access to the arts. And I think there could be these beautiful kind of reciprocal relationships between schools and creches and places that house children and young people and artists. You can imagine a company being resident in a school. During the day, they are working with those kids. They're assisting the creative arts teacher to deliver on the creative arts curriculum. In the afternoon, they're doing after-school sessions. They're providing dance classes and drama classes and, keeping the kids engaged. And in the evenings, they're rehearsing their play. And then they perform their play. And, they've got that entire community coming to see their play at the school. And this becomes a way for the school maybe to gain some income for that school, so that they are, some of the money goes back to the artist, some of the money goes to the school, so it becomes a fundraiser. And the school gains a reputation as being a place that is, a haven for the arts. And I just think about that kind of model. If we could replicate that model in every little dorp in South Africa, in every part of our rural areas, can you imagine what a country we would have? It could be extraordinary. Young, engaged, enthusiastic, energized people making wonderful work where they are, schools coming together as community hubs, and an employed young workforce. So that's what I'm working towards. And I would love, if there's anyone out there who gets excited by that idea, please join ASSITEJ. Please come, let's do this together.
Thank you very much, Yvette. This was really helpful and inspiring. As I said in the beginning of the show, the purpose of the show is to engage with different practitioners, and we talk about the work that they are doing, and also trying to inspire the the upcoming artists to have a better understanding of the industry. We are creating conversations about the cultural and creative industry. Once again, thank you very much for joining us. The Creative Passport Management team, they called me into order to say we must be careful to keep on sharing these live interviews into Facebook, but we encourage people to subscribe to the YouTube channel, because there will be time whereby we are not posting on Facebook and it become exclusive to those who have subscribed. From us, from the Creative Passport, we want to thank you very much, Sis Yvette, for joining us, and keep doing the amazing work that you are doing. We are really inspired by the work that you do. I know personally, I've worked with you very close, and you're changing people's life. We learn a lot from people like you, and you inspire us a lot. And thank you very much for coming to our platform. From me, Thami, Mbongo, Umbuyisa, Ungaleza, Undima, Usondisa, Umvemnyama. I'm saying I'm out. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Thami. Thanks. That was great.